Razia, thanks for joining us today. As I said, the kwacha rallying to a more than 1 year high today, 4,640 against the dollar. Tell us how the impact of this new law has filtered into the local currency and its performance.
Sure. First of all, I get a little bit of context setting. This was first unveiled in May, so the market has known about it for some time. There has been a process of seeking clarification on exactly what the intention of the Zambian authorities was, and it is interesting that so many weeks after the unveiling of this announcement, Zambia taking steps to reverse dollarization, which was widespread in its economy. Given the country's past, a lot of domestic transactions had been carried out in foreign currency. The authorities now saying no, legal tender in Zambia is the Zambian kwacha, and those transactions have to take place in kwacha. That has undercut pretty significantly the demand for foreign exchange. So even in the context of weaker Chinese import data, even in the context of current global concerns weighing on copper prices, we have this result with the Zambian kwacha strengthening.
How's this going to impact the economy? Because I'm sure many industries like the tourism industry who are used to getting payments in dollars now have to change their systems, change perhaps how they market. I mean, are there any implications as to how it might impact various sectors in the economy?
Well, the main rationale behind those measures was simply to try to ascertain how much of the demand for foreign exchange that an economy like Zambia was seeing was for real. To the extent that this leads to greater demand for Zambian kwacha, a stronger Zambian kwacha, as we've seen, although we'll have to see if that appreciation is sustained over the coming weeks, then that helps the authorities a great deal in their efforts to keep inflation down. Zambia, of course, currently in an extremely favorable position, the best inflation rates that the country has seen in several decades, but this must be balanced against the intent of the authorities. Spending a great deal more, spending increased 26% in this year's budget, evidence of other spending that is taking place, moral suasion being used to try to get financial intermediaries to increase their lending, money supply growth up. So on balance, this is something that is likely to help. It's likely to offset some of those other inflationary pressures and perhaps create a more stable macroeconomic environment.
And of course, we know that the authorities also devalued the kwacha this year. Do you think that that strategy has achieved what they hoped to achieve?
Well, the kwacha, of course, has been pretty much determined on the basis of market-related trades, and the concern was that in an environment of weaker copper prices, that this might lead to greater foreign exchange volatility. The fact that we have now seen these regulations put in place, which has to be seen as part of the whole package of reforms currently underway in Zambia. There are plans to move forward with the redenomination of the currency, that is, taking away 3 zeros to ease the transparency of pricing. That, we think, goes hand in hand with, first of all, encouraging greater use of the local currency.
What is your view? I mean, can the overall push-pull factors considered? Do you think that the kwacha can continue to hold on to the strength and we're going to see further strengthening? And what could be the major risk to that?
Well, the key risk in the near term is, of course, what news flow we get in terms of the global economic outlook, how that impacts on copper prices, and whether that then feeds through into weakness in the Zambian kwacha. It's clear our view is that we probably won't see a meaningful improvement, certainly in the Chinese economic data, until at least Q3, when some of the better news starts to filter through. Now, copper prices may eventually react more positively simply on the basis of some of the stimulus measures being put in place. So we are constructive on copper prices further out, and that is something that should eventually lend some support to the Zambian kwacha. In the meantime, however, we have these all-important regulations aimed at reversing dollarization, which should prevent that interim volatility from becoming too far pronounced.
Yeah. Let's go back to monetary policy, because you mentioned the fact that Zambia is sitting with very impressive inflation rates right now. A stronger currency, of course, would help on that front, on the import front, ensuring that inflation isn't escalated as a result of imported inflation. So what are your views on monetary policy right now and how this stronger kwacha might influence monetary policy going forward?
Well, we have been broadly encouraged by the way monetary policy has been conducted. Not only have we seen Zambia take perhaps bigger steps in the direction of one day moving towards an inflation target. We saw this year the introduction of a policy interest rate, and effectively through that introduction of a policy rate, which was set higher perhaps than the market had anticipated, an effective tightening of policy. We've also seen OMOs aimed at maintaining relative stability, and we think that all of these factors combined should help with the inflation outlook. Now, the starting point for inflation, especially following the rebasing of the CPI data, which has played a role in achieving this very good inflation outcome, the starting point is very favorable. And therefore, you might think, well, with a weaker base, chances are that we'll probably head higher with inflation. The question is how much higher, and of course, anything that can be done to ensure relative currency stability will certainly help with the inflation outlook.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Razia Khan, Head of Research, joining us from Standard Chartered in London.